Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd also like to welcome our newest member, Blake Moore, to the committee. We're excited to have you. Democrats and Republicans can both agree a focus on early childhood development is very important, but I find it very curious that this committee, which greenlit $2 trillion in spending last year and sparked the worst inflation in 40 years, is not using its time to examine the country's current situation. America is on the brink of a recession, which would do more harm to families than anything else we could be discussing. Inflation has risen 13.8% since Joe Biden took the oath of office. That means families are spending more money on clothes for their kids and food to feed them. Our economy shrank 1.6% first quarter of this year, and current forecast shows that this quarter it shrank again. 25% of Americans are reportedly postponing their retirement because of financial concerns. The average family will spend over $5,000 more this year just to make ends meet. The labor force participation is also down, and we still have over 11 million job openings, due in part to the Democrats' decision last year to remove work requirements from the child tax credit. The Federal Reserve has raised interest rates at the fastest rate in 40 years to combat Biden's inflation crisis. The rate on a 30-year fixed mortgage is now double than what it was before Joe Biden took the oath of office. The biggest threat to families right now is not a lack of government spending. We are in a state of crisis precisely of reckless government spending. None of this happened by accident. Washington Democrats, they purposely dumped trillions into the economy. They paid people not to work, and they strangled American fossil fuels. And congressional Democrats are bound and determined to make the economic pain and suffering even worse. Using reconciliation instructions this committee passed last September, Senate Democrats are reviving a Build Back Broke agenda that would spend hundreds of billions more and raise taxes by as much as $1 trillion. Raising taxes when the economy is in or headed toward a recession is a horrible idea. Janet Yellen, Barack Obama, Joe Manchin, and Chuck Schumer have all previously said as much, and yet that's what Democrats are trying to do to this country. A looming recession brought on by the reckless economic policies of this administration and one-party Democrat rule in Washington would be particularly painful for the parents and kids this hearing is supposedly focused on. Looking at the most recent recession from 2007 to 2009, we lost 9 million jobs. 10 million people fell into poverty, including 3 million children. We can't just ignore this problem and hope that it's going to go away. But turning back to the topic of this hearing, let's look at what our Democrat colleagues have actually proposed. The Congressional Budget Office confirmed the child care subsidies in their Build Back Broke agenda will actually raise costs for middle-class families. On top of that, the Democrats' plan specifically excludes faith-based providers that millions of families rely on for care. Under their plan, federal funding scales back, leaving states on the hook for almost half the cost within 7 years. Their plan would require states and grantees to have childcare and pre-K programs approved by the HHS secretary. This is the same secretary who let teachers' unions edit CDC guidelines to keep schools shut down last year. Meanwhile, the president's Department of Education is threatening schools that don't use the right gender pronouns or let biological men compete in girls' sports. We should be focused on the things that will directly affect Americans today, like avoiding tax increases on families and small businesses and halting inflationary spending that is making it hard for folks to afford the basic necessities needed to raise their kids. We need pro-growth policies that put families on solid ground, and when it comes to childcare and education, we need to keep the decision-making local. Stop trying to impose a Washington knows best approach. I yield back.